Welcome to episode 2 of the Dad Task Force. My name is Brad Young, and with me, as always, so far, Daivon. My man, I loved your last episode, and I know like we just recorded it like a few minutes ago. But I do a lot of production work. I do a handful of podcasts a day at this point, and I can usually tell when they're going to do well. Like I got a feeling about it, and it's based on the information that the other person gives. Mm-hmm. And like the pieces that I get to pull out of what you said are going to be critical. Now, you're the cool guy in the group, and I'm the dork. I want to start this off with this idea called emotional throttling. Now, I know last time I said something to the effect of creating structure and boundaries and expectations. Mm-hmm. This is not what I'm talking about. This is specific to dads and how they interact with their sons. If you think back to the last time you were in the car as a child with your father, or maybe you've done this already and you're going someplace, you're going on vacation, you're going fishing, going to Disneyland, Disney World, whatever theme park you're heading out to, and your kid is just bouncing off the walls because they're excited. And I can tell you, because I've heard it and I've seen it and I've talked to other people around the country as we go and do trainings. The one thing the dads always say, if you don't calm down, I'm going to turn this car around and we're going to go home. Step one. Now, you see your kid, your boy, they're crying for no good reason. And you're like, boy, I'm going to give you something to cry about. That's step two. Now, what you just effectively have done is you have said this is a cap of joy that you're allowed to share. Mm-hmm. And this is the threshold for the amount of sadness you're allowed to share. And now you have generations of boys turning into men that don't know how to process emotions and feelings in a healthy manner. And this is why this is important. The number one demographic of suicide in America is men in their 40s, like mid 30s to 40s, because they bottle that stuff up. They don't express emotions appropriately. It comes out in a lot of different ways with substance use and abuse, violence. It comes out with self-destructive behaviors, selfishness. I don't know how to deal with you, so I'm just going to leave. I'm going to go play golf. I'm going to go hang out with my boys. I'm going to go drink a beer. I'm going to do all of these things. And it's because the people that came before us, and this isn't like a knock on your dad, granddad, great granddad, or mine, but it is generationally how we've treated little boys into men. Now, a good man, a strong man, is one that is emotionally and intellectually intelligent and has the ability to protect and provide for their families. And having that clarity of mind to like make objective decisions and be the bad guy if the decision is objective and makes sense for the greater good, not selfish. So you haven't heard me say that before. I haven't. Now, what do you? I intentionally didn't tell you because I wanted to catch your reaction. What is that? Does any of that connect, or am I off base?
No, 100%. And again, it's not a knock on like the previous generations, but I was definitely like raised like can't cry, you can't like have too much. You got to be very like even keel. Like a good man is like a stoic man.
Yeah.
And the older I got, I was like, man, like this is like I tell everybody. Once I had girls, like, dude, I cry about everything. But like,
don't tell my kids that because I don't cry.
Right. But no, it makes a lot of sense, and it's like you do see a lot of these outbursts because men don't know what to do with those emotions, and eventually it just boils over, and it's got to go somewhere.
Yep. So, usually unhealthy stress management techniques and tactics. So, we talked about you in the last episode. My background is really simple. I'm not a complicated person. I'm kind of a dummy. I grew up in a very small town and joined the Army to go somewhere else. And on a whim, pre 9/11, while I was at basic training, 9/11 happened. The Army said, "This is what you're going to do." So I was an intelligence person, and just to get the oxymoron jokes out of the way, military intelligence, I've never heard it before. Then my wife, who I've been married to for 20 years, not at this point, but as of today, said, "Hey, enough with the Army. You need a real job." I was like, okay, like what? And she's like, you need to, you should think about being a cop. And I was like, I don't want to be the police. Nobody likes the police. And she goes, well, nobody likes you either. It'll be a good fit. And it was all right. It wasn't a bad fit, but I got a lot of training and experience as a police officer in California. I was a hostage negotiator, a crisis intervention officer, a canine handler. I've done a lot of things. I've written articles and speak at conferences, and now I run a training company. But the biggest piece is as a school resource officer. So I managed the feelings and emotions for about 15,000 kids. It was me and one other guy, and we were de facto uncles. We had parents that would call and say, what do we do? We had kids that would tell us things that we, wouldn't have had or known otherwise had they not said something. And we dealt with a lot of self-destructive behavior in these communities. And so the reason this is so important is because of this experience in this role that I feel like we are failing future generations by not being equipping men to be dads. So as a dad, you have two choices. If you've got kids, you can either leave a hole that they'll try to fill with stuff, materialism, bad relationships, promiscuity or risky behaviors, substance abuse issues, whatever it may be. They'll try to fill that hole, that vacancy. It's why there's the daddy issue joke that you see in every joke about a stripper or a prostitute. There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Or a man can leave a legacy.
Yeah.
Your kids will either mourn your death or they'll rejoice your absence. And once you're gone, and what they do is entirely up to you. And if you've been a dirtbag up until this point, you can turn that around. I had mentioned that we're working on individual training programs that we're going to push through this this task force. And if it's not clearly evident, I believe that we're focusing on mentorship and how to build strong relationships with not only your kids, but other kids and develop them into successful human beings.
Yep.
My class is a communication class. It's going to be in 21 days, because that's what it takes to build a habit. You will get 10-minute clips of how to build relationships, how to actively listen, how to engage appropriately, how to have hard conversations. And there's daily exercises so that you're putting these things into practical application and practical use. And the reason is at the end of the 21 days, now you have a new habit. You're a brand new person. You have 18 years with your kid before they become an adult, a legal adult, and you can flip everything around in less than a month. All you have to do is actually apply it. Man, I don't even know where to start, because there's just so many stories that like advocate for being present and being a better intentional father. By the way, like he said last time, just pure disclaimer, I am not an expert on any of this. I'm kind of an idiot myself. And my wife is the best parent between the two of us. She's got a great relationship, but like you said last time, you said a dad might have to bring fire and brimstone, but also might have to turn that off and go the other direction.
Yep.
And just last night, we had a learning moment with our oldest daughter, and it started fire and brimstone, and it ended with soft velvet hands. To just, because after you knock somebody down, you got to be able to pick them back up.
Yeah, we can start there. Like, how do you know? Because I mean, as parents, as fathers, as dads, like we usually are the like voice of authority, and so it is super easy to come in and be like fire and brimstone right away. How do you know when to make that switch?
Well, I think that a lot of it has to do with yourself. Like, you have to have some self-control, and you have to have some self-awareness. If you are unaware of how you're acting in a situation. So like one of the key components of this is you look at life through three lenses: the what am I seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, all of that aspect, right? And then based on that information, how do I compare that to my thoughts, beliefs, biases, and opinions? And then with those two things, what is it doing to my body? Is my heart rate going up? Am I sweating? Am my temperature rising? What is the physiological response? And if you just pause and process and like give it 5 seconds, unless somebody's on fire or getting shot or stabbed, there's no reason that you can't take this time. And then what you do is you pause and you process, you run through that quick test and say, all right, is this a heart issue of my child? Is it a failure on my part because I didn't express my expectations? Or is it just my kid being an idiot and they need corrective action? Once you've determined whether or not the behavior is bad, your fault or their fault or a combination thereof, then you can actually figure out how to get to the heart of it. I don't even know if that's quite exactly how you asked what you asked, but
No, that makes sense.
I love the idea of stoicism. I think stoicism has a place in fatherhood, but it's got to be appropriate. You have the heart of the stoic is somebody that has control over their mind and control over themselves more than anything else. It's not. It's saying that there's a stimulus out there. There's something out there that's causing me to feel a certain way, and I'm responsible for that. How I react to it. I can't control you, but I can control how I react to you.
Yeah. That's a great answer. I think it introduces like the idea of like extreme ownership.
This is not endorsed by Jocko. However, if he wants to endorse this, we would happily accept that.
Jocko, if you want to be a guest on our show,
just call me.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think that's a great call out there. Now, I know what some people are going to think is like early on we said that, you know, we were kind of taught to be super stoic and not have emotion. How do you introduce having emotion, whether that's high emotion or low emotion, into also being like a stoic?
So I think that we have to break that down a little bit simpler. It's because it's not that easy. It's what is an appropriate response for this? Your kids are going to model the behavior that you put in front of them. If you act like a jerk to people for no reason other than just because you think it's funny, don't be surprised if your kid acts like a jerk to people because they think it's funny. If you are overly sensitive or you cry, every time a romantic comedy comes on, then you're telling your kids, oh, this is the appropriate time to cry. Because guess what? They don't know. They're learning this behavior based on what they see from you or what they see on TV or whatever their influence is. So one of the aspects of this is you look at your kid, they're born from 0 to like 12. You were their primary source of influence, unless you aren't around and they get their influence from the television or movies or aunts and uncles or the older siblings. And then at 12, when middle school age hits, their friends take a 50-50 influence with you. And then once they hit that high school mark, your level to influence behavior goes right under the chair, because now they're spending most of their time, they're almost adults, they're spending their time with their friends, they're spending their time at school most of the day. So that's where all of that influence comes from. So if you don't establish like this is how you act appropriately early on, you're only setting them up for the unknown. Now, to answer your question, how do you establish high emotion, low emotion, and compare that into stoicism or include that into stoicism? I think it's important to recognize that it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to be angry and disgusted. It's okay to have these feelings. They are natural feelings. There is nothing unnatural about emotions. It's the appropriateness of your reaction that matters. And because a stoic has control of themselves. And this isn't a thing on stoicism by all stretches of the imagination. I love the idea of stoicism, I don't necessarily align entirely with the belief of a stoic.
Right. It's the balance.
It
It's
is
the
a balance.
of everything. Yeah.
And it's a balance between like stoics and faith, right?
Exactly.
So having both gives you like, because they say a lot of the same things,
right,
similarly, and then they start to vary on like higher power type stuff. So,
of course.
Well, how about you? Like, we've all done it. We've all had like a reaction.
Yeah.
And
it's important. So like I run hot sometimes. If I haven't worked out, I'm probably running hot that day. And so like if I hear something I don't want to hear or see something I don't want to see, like I'm human, I snap sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. For me, the important part is to like, if you have that reaction, whether it's high emotion or low emotion or whatever it is, like take a second, understand everything that went into that, and then go talk to your kid or whoever you snapped at. Yeah. Don't just be the person who's too proud to be like, to admit you were wrong. You know,
that's actually really important. Pride will kill your relationships with your kids. Yeah. And then you wonder why they act like little jerks. Because they're basically baby images of you. Yeah. And you're like, what the? And then all of a sudden you're surprised when the kid drops an F-bomb at preschool and somebody does something. You're like, where did he hear that? Well, I have no idea. It must have been his mother. You know, it's like, no, dog, that was you.
Yeah.
That was definitely you. And it's, how do you humble yourself to the point of walking into your 7-year-old, your 8-year-old that you just tuned up for doing something a 7 or 8-year-old would do, and then say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. This is what I should have done. This is what I did. And then do you ask for forgiveness?
I think it's okay to ask for forgiveness. You have to lay it out on your kid that like they don't have to forgive everybody, including you. Like they don't have to forgive you for snapping on them. Kids, God bless them. Like most of the time, they will forgive you in due time. Yeah. But I'm not gonna like sit there and ask my daughter or my son to be like, or to tell them like, hey, you have to forgive me right now, or you have to forgive your sibling right now. You know. But in due time, yeah, like you have to tell them that they also can't just bask on it.
Yeah, that's or lord it over you.
Right.
Like, oh, you want my forgiveness? Gonna need a new toy. No, that's not the way that works. And I don't have her blessing to talk about the specifics, but there was like an incident, you know, yesterday when we had to have some corrective behavior, and I was already hot under the collar when she came home. Because I had already prefaced days before, I don't want X, Y, and Z happening. And then X, Y, and Z happened. And I'm like, I just told you this, right? So now I feel like I'm being lied to. I feel like there's disobedience issues. Like there's multiple things happening. So as we're going through this, I can feel like just the heat coming out of my shirt. I'm like, and I can see it's like, you know, firstborns are rule followers for the most part. I can see it. I can hear it. At some point, lectures stop being effective, you know? And so you got to just like, all right, well, do you have any questions? And they're like, no. Okay. And then they go in a process because kids process things slower. And then all of a sudden, it's like, all right, well, I said my piece. I feel better. And now I'm in a better headspace to help calm you down now that I got you all riled up. And let's just insert this little piece right here is when people are upset or they're having an emotional response, emotions are high. That means that logic and reasoning are low. The two cannot be on the same plane at the same time because logic and reasoning, objective decision-making comes from the prefrontal cortex, which takes about 25 to 28 years to develop, which is where we store information. That's where experience comes from. Good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from bad decisions, where we process information. Right. Then the amygdala, which is ready to go right at birth, right, is where fight, flight, and freeze, strong emotions, survival brain comes from. And when we feel threatened, our safety, a control issue, no voice in the situation, if we feel embarrassed, or we are going to be embarrassed, or there's an achievement that is threatened. If any of those 5 things are threatened, it triggers the amygdala. We need to protect our body. We need to protect this right now. So in this situation, control.
Right.
I told you to do something. You didn't do it. You've threatened my control. You threatened the things, and now I'm starting to escalate. Because of that, my emotions are high. So I'm in amygdala brain, right? And so my decision making is like so far down at the bottom, like it's just not going to happen. But time naturally allows these things to cross and come back over. So if your kid's all angry and upset, give them some time. Let them process and then come back to it. And then what happens is, as they cross waves, they're like, oh, well, the threat is no longer existing, so I'm safe. I can have. So you have daughters, and daughters are a little bit more emotionally reactive than boys, generally speaking. It's not an absolute. How do you calm them down?
That is a hard one, because not only do I have girls, my girls are very much like me when I was younger. Like, they are going to stand their ground. And so the biggest thing is, like, you can't, like you said earlier, like, you've got to be able to identify like what's going on here. Like, you can't also ratchet up the situation. An example is like my oldest daughter is going to stand her ground. I know if I just keep pushing and pushing, she's going to push back even harder. And if I start to do the opposite and just kind of like feed into what she's doing, or just absorb what she's doing, like, you can see like the fire just comes down. Like, it's almost like she starts to put it out herself, because she's not getting the reaction she's expecting, which is going to like amplify it.
Sure.
Controlling their emotions on the other side, like when they're super sad. I mentioned it on the last episode, but having like that safety net, of like, hey, if you're upset, like, let me know what's going on. Don't hold it in, just pour it all out, and then we'll talk through it. And if you still need time afterwards to like be in your feels and, process it, by all means. But if not, like, we can work on how to dig yourself out of it.
That's great. So, I think that we'll take a moment here to talk about some social media aspects, right? So you're talking about everything that it's top notch, and what you're hearing is wisdom, right? So it's lived experience. You can find some of it in a book, but books vary in opinion, so it depends on what you read whether or not it matters. But it's lived experience. Lived experience has value. So knowledge without miles is useless. I can read all the books in the world, but it makes no difference if I've never applied any of the things that I've learned. Right. It's ridiculous to assume as you're an expert until you've tested your theory. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to open up a couple social media channels specific to the Dad Task Force. And we will both be admins in that. And as it starts to grow, we'll assign other moderators to kind of keep everything in check. But the biggest piece of bringing this up is you get to ask questions. If I'm going through the mix right now, I'm in the middle of a tornado, and I'm like, I cannot find a grounding agent. What can I do? I throw it to the group, because this is a group of dads that are coming together from multiple disciplines to achieve one goal: be better fathers and raise solid kids, because solid kids become leaders, and leaders run this country and the world. Yeah. And that's the goal. So we're going to open that up soon, if it's not already open by the time this airs. And honestly, like, this is episode 2. The likelihood of anybody actually watching this at this point is low, but you never know. And so we want to be prepared for it. This is on the table, as you can see. I don't know if I don't have an ad for it quite yet, but it is Free Spirits bourbon. And so I'm an avid bourbon drinker. I enjoy spicy 100 proof or better whiskey. But it's important to know that pouring into a bottle doesn't pour out your problems. So you can have all of the opportunity to engage in social functions and have that cognitive feel of having a drink at the end of the day without all of the harmful side effects. And because this product is it ships right to your door. If you don't have it in your area, you can. But if you order it online, you can use the promo code that's going to come up on the screen right here and get, I believe it's 15% off of your order. So that's just one thing to help push it. Is there anything you want to add or promote at this point in time?
No, I want to echo what you just said. That I mean, especially talking about some of the topics that we talk about here, like there's a lot of heaviness to some of it, and some people do like pour into a bottle or,
For sure,
you know, try to help themselves out that way. It's not helpful.
No.
I do also enjoy a good bourbon.
Sure.
But there's a great non-alcoholic option, and you know, I do coach, and sometimes I like want some bourbon, but I'm not gonna drink some bourbon before I go coach some little kids.
Exactly.
And so that's like, these are great options
for sure
for things like that. So.
And there's a couple of other things coming down the pipe. We've got so I have a how-to guide, negotiation tactics for patrol officers. They kind of cover some basic communication things for eliciting information and negotiating at the patrol level, but it also has pieces for parents, and so that'll be available soon for you guys to watch and enjoy. If anything else, man, just be present. There's 100 different things you can do with your kid that doesn't require sitting in the same room and being on separate screens. So engage, empower, and get out there and be a good dad.
Absolutely.
Cool. Nice.